Takumi was a miserable salaryman who was on track to die alone. However, everything changes when he's Isekai'd to a magical world with a cheat ability to create anything he wants, making him the strongest alchemist who cracks everyone. The story starts with Takumi being summoned to an interdimensional white space, where he meets a hot step-mommy goddess who immediately apologizes because he was summoned by mistake. She explains that he wasn't chosen and was just mixed up with a set of heroes who were randomly selected. When Takumi asks if she can send him back to Earth, the goddess admits that she can't because the spell used to summon him has been corrupted. However, to compensate for her foolish mistake, the goddess gathers every good stat and shoves it into his soul before teleporting him to a magical world. In this new world, Takumi sees his reflection in the river and is shocked to see he is now hotter than K-pop stars. When he checks his stats, he discovers that he has been granted magic abilities alongside production skills, so he decides to test them out. He plays around with a few water blades and earthbending magic, and once he's had his fill, he figures it would be best to head to the nearest village. However, along the way, he finds a log of wood, and using his appraisal skill, he discovers that the wood is of high quality, so he crafts the perfect spear using his wood crafting ability. Suddenly, a frightened girl named Molly runs behind him and hides because a rabbit monster is chasing after her. As the monster charges straight at them, Takumi, shaking in his boot, manages to swing his spear hard, and by a stroke of luck, he drops the crazed bunny. This successful drop immediately configures his job status to warrior, but a warrior job is the last thing Takumi wants, since he desires a peaceful life. After Molly thanks him for saving her life, Takumi asks where she lives, and she reveals that her village is nearby, and she was collecting medicinal herbs when things went south. Since Takumi plans to find a place where he can settle, he asks the girl if he can tag along to her village, and she excitedly agrees. A while later, Takumi and Molly arrive at her humble village, where Takumi meets her parents, who thank him for saving their daughter. When Takumi asks if he can stay in the village, Molly's dad, Banga, says yes without hesitation, and to repay Takumi for saving his daughter, he promises he and the villagers will help build him a home. Later on, when they show Takumi the land on which the house will be built, Takumi uses his earth magic to clear the bushes, and the villagers are shocked that he can use magic. Over the following weeks, Takumi settles in the village to start his new quiet life, and using his woodworking abilities, he is able to craft furniture for his new home. He also changes his job status from warrior to alchemist, and to properly sharpen his alchemy skill, he starts working closely with Baban, the village blacksmith, to craft weapons. However, using too much mana to make weapons drains him of his energy, so to replenish his mana, Takumi ventures into the forest in search of medicinal herbs. While at it, he suddenly encounters a ferocious wild boar, but as he tries to attack, the result is a complete failure, just like his previous life.
Damn!
As the boar counterattacks to finish Takumi off, a poison spider suddenly intervenes from nowhere to save him from dying in his own anime.
What?
But gets injured in the process. Just then, the beast charges again, and with little time to think, Takumi attacks using his alchemy ability, which decomposes the boar upon contact. After Takumi thanks and heals the poison spider that saves him, he tries to leave, but the system alerts him that his Riz has somehow tamed the spider beast, shocking him. Takumi then decides to keep the spider as a pet and names it Maple before taking it back to the village. The villagers, upon seeing the massive carcass of the boar Takumi took down, are shocked, but they are even more shocked to see the monster spider he tamed. The following morning, Takumi wakes to find himself completely wrapped in Maple's web like a burrito. When he asks what exactly she thinks she is doing, Maple complains that he has been too busy, which has made her very bored. Takumi then apologizes for neglecting her, and when he promises to take a break so they can play, Maple gets so excited that she hops on his pogo stick and starts bouncing. Suddenly, Molly walks in on them and freezes at the sus sight, but when she spots Maple's silky webs, it catches her attention, and sometime later, she uses the silk to make a beautiful shirt. Turns out, maple silk is an exceptional crafting material that even the nobles use to make cloth, so for the rest of the day, Maple produces more silky webs for Molly and her friends, which they can use to make clothes. It's been a month since Takumi arrived in the village, but now his mind is set on heading to the city, so he can learn more about alchemy. However, he is worried about leaving Molly and her family, who have taken him in like a member of their family, but Banga and Bongo assure him that they understand his reason for leaving. They also inform him that a trader named Papek will be coming to the village a week from now, and a carriage has already been arranged to take him to the city. Takumi is touched by their immense help, so he lowers his head in gratitude and thanks them. After leaving Baban's blacksmithing shop, Takumi runs into Molly's MILF mom, Martha, who shows him a bucket of rabbit innards, explaining that even though they are the most delicious part of a rabbit, they need to be processed, since they contain disease and parasites. To help, Takumi uses his purification magic on the meat to make it edible, and upon seeing that Takumi can use such powerful magic, Martha almost wets her pants.
Yeah, boy.
But she also warns him not to expose such magic to anyone when he eventually gets to the city. Before leaving the village for good, Takumi decides to repay the villagers for their generosity by using his earth magic to erect the Great Wall of Japan to protect them. The following week, Papik arrives to take Takumi to the city, and as a parting gift, Takumi gives Bonga one of his healing potions. But the instant Papik sets eyes on the potion, he gets fascinated with it. After saying his goodbyes to Molly, her family, and the entire village, Takumi sets off on his journey to the city. Inside the carriage, Takumi befriends 3 adventurers, a crackhead named Heath, a redhead named Riel, and a chop-faced baldy named Bogar, who are currently working as bodyguards for Papik. However, midway to the capital, the carriage gets jumped by a pack of ugly, smelly goblins, but the adventurers handle them effortlessly without breaking a sweat. 3 days later, when they finally arrive at the capital, Takumi follows the 3 adventurers to the Adventurers Guild, where he registers as an adventurer but with zero intention of going on any missions, just to use the guild card for identification in the capital. After leaving the Adventurers Guild, Takumi visits Papik in his office to discuss the healing potion that he desires so much. Papik proposes paying a whopping 7 million yen for a consistent supply of the potions, and Takumi almost goes loco, since he is a slum baby who's never seen an amount that big in his life. Not only that, Papik, being a heavy baller, also offers to give Takumi a nice crib with a workshop so he can conveniently produce the healing potions without disturbance. Several hours later, Takumi follows a dude named Thomas, who works for Papik, to check out the house, and he almost loses his mind seeing that it's a mansion. After they're done, Thomas decides to give Takumi a little tour of the city, and as they walk down the street, Takumi notices that the air smells worse than your girlfriend's fishy punani.
What do you mean by that?
Takumi immediately accuses Thomas of releasing smelly fart bombs, but Thomas denies it, explaining that the smell is emanating from the sewage underground. He further explains that the nobles of the city normally use magical purifying devices to treat the sewage, but since it's an expensive procedure, they've stopped. The following week, Takumi and Maple finally move into the mansion, but since the mansion lacks a toilet system, and Takumi can't exactly order one from Temu, he decides to create one using his alchemy skill. Sometime later, Papik shows up at the mansion unannounced, complaining of watery poop, and then requests to use Takumi's toilet. Takumi then points to where his toilet is, but the instant Papik enters, he rushes back outside, surprised to see such a sophisticated water closet.
What sorcery is this?
Takumi explains that he built the whole thing himself and even embedded a magical purification system directly into it, and upon hearing this, Papik is beyond impressed. When he asks whether Takumi can use purification magic, Takumi remembers Martha's warning not to expose his gift and immediately begs Papik not to expose him. Papik promises not to, but then he goes all Warren Buffett, begging Takumi to make 100 toilets for his business.
What the hell no?
Knowing that Takumi will need extra help to accomplish this, Papik suggests he hire a maid, but not just any maid, a slave. At first, Takumi protests, but after Papik explains that only a maid who is bound by a contract can keep his magic a secret, Takumi realizes that Papik might be right. So the next day, Takumi and Papik visit a slave trading company, and while Takumi takes a stroll around the facility, he rounds a corner and comes face to face with a hot elf baddie whose drop-dead beauty instantly tickles his whim-wham.
Yeah, boy.
Shortly afterwards, Takumi and Papik meet Mulan, the thick dummy mummy responsible for running the entire slave company. After Takumi explains that he needs a slave who can handle the housework but accompany him to dangerous locations to gather materials, Mulan tells him flat out that one slave is not going to cover that job description and that he will need 2. She then brings in the first candidate, a cute girl named Maria, who was kidnapped by bandits when she was young and has no family. Since Maria is skilled in general housekeeping, Mulan suggests that Takumi buys her to manage his needs, and Takumi agrees. This makes Maria overly excited, and she swears to do just about anything to make her master happy, even slurping on his candy stick.
What do you mean by that?
But Takumi immediately corrects her that he doesn't need her for that freaky purpose. For the second slave, Mulan tells Takumi that he would need to purchase a war slave, and the instant Maria overhears this, she immediately volunteers her friend Sophia for the position. But Mulan shuts her down right away. However, Mulan's awkward reaction at the mention of the girl Sophia sparks Takumi's interest, so he insists on seeing who this Sophia is. Seeing his persistence, Mulan has no choice but to take Takumi to Sophia's room, and Takumi is shocked to see that Sophia is the elf baddie he was lost in her sauce earlier.
Yeah, boy.
Mulan explains that Sophia was captured during the war 50 years ago, and Takumi is stunned to realize that the hottie is as old as Joe Biden. Mulan also reveals that Sophia has a large scar on her left ear, impaired limbs that can cause issues in her daily tasks, and sealed powers, which are probably due to some curse. With all these fatal flaws, Mulan believes Sophia is totally bad market, but Takumi simply asks to have a private moment with her. After Mulan leaves, Takumi immediately grabs Sophia's face like he wants to kiss her, catching her off guard. While staring into her eyes, Takumi uses his appraisal skill to check her stats, and he shockingly realizes that even though Sophia's abilities are sealed, she is incredibly strong. However, he figures he might be able to heal her impairment and dispel her curse, so the moment Miss Belonga Melons walks back in, Takumi immediately tells her that he wants to form a contract with Sophia. Sophia immediately protests, reminding him that she is totally worthless, but Takumi tells her in his world no fat cake is worthless. With that, Mulan laughs excitedly, happy to finally get rid of Sophia, and after all the paperwork has been concluded, she forms a magic contract binding Takumi and his slave girls. Sometime later, Takumi takes Maria and Sophia home, and the girls are beyond shocked to see that he keeps a poisonous spider as a pet. After showing them to their individual rooms, Takumi suggests they take a bath so they can clean up their creamy tunas for the night, and the girls agree. While taking their bath, Maria couldn't stop yapping about how nice Takumi has been to them, which is totally different from how masters treat their slaves. But Sophia has a lot on her mind, as she still finds Takumi's Mr. Nice Guy behavior very suspicious. Later that night, after the girls are done with their baths, Takumi treats them to a continental dish, but Maria starts throwing a tantrum as she feels she is supposed to be the one making dinner for her master, and not the other way around. However, Takumi calms her down, reminding her that she will always have all the time in the world to prepare dinner for him. On the other hand, Sophia is a bit uncomfortable about having to sit at the same table as her master, and when she points this out, Takumi lets her know he has no intention of treating them like dogs simply because they are slaves. Meanwhile, at the royal capital, a full year has quietly passed since the three summoned heroes arrived in the empire, and the bald-headed king, while in a meeting with his royal court, is worried about their training. But his advisors assure him that even though the heroes were a bit hesitant to train at first, they have since resumed, and things are moving in the right direction. At the training ground, the summoned heroes are battling it out, but the only girl among them, Akane, is still suspicious of Elizabeth, the court mage, and feels something doesn't add up. Back at the mansion, Sophia, still suspicious of Takumi, spies on him while he works in his workshop, and when she sees him cutting his hand repeatedly like some crazy scientist, she immediately confronts him, but in the process, she passes out. Takumi later takes her to her room, where Maria explains that the curse laid on Sophia forces her body to shut down from exhaustion whenever she moves around too much or gets too excited. Upon hearing this, Takumi decides to heal Sophia of all her injuries and also dispel the curse that has been stopping her from using her powers. The following morning, Sophia wakes and realizes that she feels much better than she has in years, and when she asks why she is sleeping on the bed, Maria informs her that it was Takumi who carried her there. Sophia immediately gets pissed at the mention of Takumi and then warns Maria that he cannot be trusted, but Maria shows her that Takumi had healed her ears and even cured her of the curse. Later that night, Sophia meets Takumi, and after she thanks him for healing her, Takumi explains that the reason he had been cutting his hand like a total wacko back at the workshop was that he was trying to train his healing ability so he could level up and then heal her. Upon hearing this, Sophia feels bad for ever misjudging him, and after bawling her eyes out in regret, she kneels and swears her complete loyalty to Takumi as her master. Over the following weeks, Takumi and the girls have been able to mass-produce a massive supply of toilets for Paypek, and while making the last batch of the day, Takumi suggests that they take a break. When Maria asks if he wants to do something else with his hands, Takumi, knowing what she is trying to say, quickly tells her that he is thinking of going on some kind of journey. He explains that his goal is to find materials that can be useful to his production and have fun while doing it. He says he plans on taking Sophia and Maple on the journey, but Maria immediately starts tearing up, insisting that she also wants to tag along. Takumi reminds her that she isn't built for combat, but when Maria does the puppy eye thing, he immediately simps and decides to check her stats. While staring into her eyes, Takumi notices that Maria has some skills that are better suited for combat, so he agrees to let her tag along. A few minutes later, Takumi takes the girls to his workshop to figure out what kind of weapons they can handle. Sophia says she prefers something long and thick, about 9 inches deep, while Maria admits that she likes something shorter but girthy. With that, Takumi spends the following day crafting the perfect weapons for his girls, while Sophia trains Maria in combat outside the mansion. Once Takumi is done making the weapons, he figures that the next thing they will need is good body armor. However, to make the perfect body armor, Takumi will need the girls' measurements, but since he is too shy of a virgin to measure their bust and cakes directly, he comes up with a genius plan to create mannequins of the girls to use instead. After Takumi weaves the perfect body armor using Maple's silky web, Maria and Sophia try it on, and Takumi is pleased that his slaves now look like real baddies. To complete the style, he gives them their individual weapons, and then he also gifts them magic-imbued rings he crafted that can be used as focuses for casting magic. Later that day, before embarking on the journey, Takumi and the girls head to the Adventurers Guild, where Takumi registers them as true adventurers and also registers all 3 of them as a party. While the receptionist handles the request, he reminds Takumi of a quest he needs to complete as part of his mandatory assignment as an adventurer, and Takumi promises to handle it as soon as possible. As Takumi checks the list of available requests to decide which one he should choose, 3 disgusting bullies approach him and the girls, offering to teach the girls some deep adventuring lessons. Since Takumi has never seen this kind of ugly people before, he immediately steps up to defend the girls. However, his boldness pisses off the fat pig of a leader, who wastes no time trying to punch him in the face, but Takumi transforms into Man of Steel, and the dude's wrist shatters. Before the situation turns into an all-out brawl, the Meathead Guild leader, Barak, intervenes to shut it down. When he demands to know what the heck happened, the receptionist interrupts to explain the situation. After hearing the full story, the guild leader tells the good-for-nothing bullies to piss off, and as for Takumi and the girls, he demands to see them in his office. When they enter his office, Barrett questions Takumi, trying to understand how a little guy like him can be so strong, and Takumi says it's all thanks to his mom, who wrestles him every night. After witnessing how strong Takumi is, the receptionist suggests they promote him to D rank, and the guild master agrees. So they give Takumi and the girls quests that will help all 3 of them rank up more easily. For the first quest, Takumi and the girls are instructed to exterminate a group of dirty goblins, a task they effortlessly pull off without breaking a sweat, after which they retrieve the cores. However, things get complicated when more goblins start to show up, more than expected, which makes Sophia believe there must be a goblin camp nearby with a goblin general in their midst. As they plan how they will infiltrate the goblin camp, Maple informs Takumi that she has evolved, so Takumi immediately puts her away inside his item box so she can rest. Even without Maple's help, Takumi and the girls are able to locate the goblin camp, and using the combined power of their magic rings, they unleash a powerful inferno that cooks the goblins. However, just when they think the danger is over, the ugly general and 2 of his high-ranking soldiers suddenly attack, but Takumi and the girls manage to eliminate them. After the mission that day, Takumi and the girls return to the guild to give their report, and while they discuss with Barrack, Maple suddenly pops out of the item box, now evolved into a spider girl. As a reward for completing the mission, Takumi and the girls are promoted to D rank, and upon getting home that day, Maria shyly meets Takumi with a problem that has been bothering her. She says she wants to make Victoria's Secret Coochie fabric for herself and Sophia, and needs Maple to produce silky materials for them. However, while mid-conversation, Maple suddenly pops out of nowhere to inform Takumi that businessman Papek is around to see him. When Takumi enters the living room, he meets Papek, who informs him that a certain lord named Godwin is requesting to see him. When Takumi asks why a lord is requesting his presence, Papek suspects it is because of the purification magic device that Takumi installs in the toilets he makes. Sometime later that day, Papek takes Takumi and the girls to Lord Godwin's manor, where the chopped-faced lord thanks Takumi for inventing the greatest purification system ever used in toilets, capable of cleaning even the worst waste. The lord says that thanks to this invention, his city is now cleaner than ever before and no longer stinks like a dirty armpit. He lowers his head in appreciation but then warns Takumi that, with how valuable his invention is, other empires might start coming after him. A few hours later, back at the mansion, Maple finishes making the underwear for Maria and Sofia, and then gives it to Takumi. However, being so close to girls' underwear for the first time nearly drives Takumi mad, so the spineless weeb locks himself in his room, determined to remain an anime protagonist. A week later, Takumi has leveled up his alchemy skills from making self-purifying toilet systems to creating refrigerators, and the girls are impressed. Now they can store fresh ingredients to cook anytime, and after testing the refrigerators out, Takumi plans on taking them over to Papek's office so he can start his next project. When Sofia asks what the next project would be, Takumi reveals that he plans on upgrading their equipment using two of the strongest minerals on Earth, mithril and adamantine. So, to do that, the following morning, Takumi meets up with the guild receptionist to inquire where he can get these minerals in the city. The receptionist tells him that there's no blacksmith in the city who can provide him with these rare minerals, and the only way to get them is if he mines them himself. However, the problem is that Takumi will need to be a member of the blacksmith guild, and the only way around this is if he accepts a quest to defeat the monsters that occasionally appear in the mine shaft. Takumi immediately agrees to accept the quest, but the muscle-headed guild leader suddenly pops out of nowhere to inform him of the tree monsters that lie in wait in the forest close to the mine. While they discuss, Riel suddenly shows up, and Takumi, excited to see a familiar face, immediately decides to flex a little by inviting Riel to spend the night at his crib, to which Riel agrees. However, before heading to the house, Takumi decides to make a brief stop at Papek's office to inform him of his latest invention, the refrigerator, and to also ask for a carriage, which Papek agrees to give him. At twilight, back at the mansion, Sofia is worried that her master is not yet back and scolds herself for not accompanying him. Later, as Takumi and Riel walk to the mansion, Riel is suddenly attacked by a cloaked assassin who turns out to be Sofia. Sofia is about to cut Riel down, thinking he is planning to harm her master, but Takumi intervenes immediately and begs her not to, explaining that Riel is his homie. After Takumi and Sofia apologize to Riel for almost sending him to the Phantom Zone, they head to the mansion together, where Riel gets to see that Takumi is living the life of a top G with two thick baddies and one additional spider girl at his beck and call. Riel immediately gets depressed, realizing that even a small boy like Takumi is scoring a hat trick while he is still gooning to imaginary Mia Khalifa. When Takumi shyly explains that he isn't doing anything freaky with the girls, Riel immediately tries to rizz Sofia up, but Sofia tells him to jump off a cliff. The next day, after Riel leaves, Takumi goes back to crafting, and this time he creates the perfect mana-draining sword for the girls, and then gulps down a healing potion like a bottle of beer after the stress of the work drains all his mana. 3 days later, Takumi and the girls board the carriage prepared by Papek, ready to head for the mine, and on board is a Wolverine-looking blacksmith named Gambo. Meanwhile, Papek receives a messenger from the king, who informs him of the royal family's keen interest in Takumi's famous self-purifying toilet system. Apparently, due to the emergence of the toilet, the sewage problem in the capital has been partially solved. However, the old senile man who should have died last week emphasizes his fear that news of the toilet has spread far and wide and is most likely to attract danger. A few hours later, Takumi and his crew arrive at the forest boundary that leads to the mine, and as they make their way deep into the forest, they are attacked by tree monsters. After they take down a couple of them, they realize it might take a while to fight them off with physical combat, so they decide to switch to magic. With magic, they successfully take down numerous tree monsters at once, but then they face an elder tree monster that keeps regenerating no matter how many times they slice it down. Sofia figures the best way to end the menace once and for all is with fire, so she instructs Takumi to sheath his sword in flames, and once Takumi does this, he is able to obliterate the tree monster. With the forest now cleared of monsters, Takumi and his crew finally make it to the mining town, where they visit the Adventurers Guild and learn that their quest inside the mine is to eliminate the Iron Mole, a monster that feeds on ore. Shortly afterwards, they enter the mine, and after gathering the mithril and adamantite ore they need, they come face to face with the Iron Mole, so Takumi immediately attacks with blinding light since it's a monster that hates light, and then Sofia finishes it off by stabbing it. After gathering all the ore they need, Takumi and the crew finally return to the city, where Gambo teaches Takumi how to successfully forge the ores in his workshop to create stronger materials. With the knowledge Takumi gains, he is able to craft armor that is stronger than steel for Maria and Sofia, as well as weapons that have the ability to fire off magic attacks without uttering a single chant. Thrilled by her new acquisition, Sofia thanks Takumi, promising that in this lifetime she will sacrifice even her own life to protect him, but then she requests a shield to be able to do that. Meanwhile, in heaven, the goddess, while watching over Takumi through a magic mirror, sees a terrifying vision of the future, a sword covered in blood and two men standing victoriously over a battlefield. Also, in the neighboring kingdom, the two male heroes, Akira and Yamato, who were summoned, are now fully ready to work for the bald king and his evil mage daughter, Elizabeth, believing they are trying to save the world. Elsewhere, a priest sent by the Pope is in a tense meeting with the king about urgent news they receive that someone is using purification magic to build toilets. The priest strongly believes purification magic is an attribute bestowed by God and should be preserved only for the church, and as such, he demands that the so-called mage responsible for the purification magic be handed over to them. However, the Gandalf-looking king doesn't buy into his religious fanatic talk and refuses to give up his greatest asset, who has been purifying his kingdom of unnecessary waste. The next morning at the mansion, Papek visits Takumi to casually brief him on the issue the kingdom is currently facing with the church because of him. Papek also reveals that the real reason he came is that after Lord Godwin sent some samples of the toilets to the king, impressed by how nice he felt after taking a dump, has requested an audience with Takumi. Later that night, after Takumi tells Maria and Sophia of the king's demand to see them, he says it would be rude to refuse an audience with the king, and then asks if they would like to accompany him to the royal capital. When the girls excitedly agree to go with him, Takumi announces that they will leave in a week, but first they will need to get a monster horse carriage. Also, for extra protection, Takumi mentions that he plans on making high-grade cloaks for the girls, made solely from dark element magical stones that will be able to block perception. The following morning, while shopping for foodstuffs, Maria and Sophia chat about Takumi and how caring he is as a master, as well as how talented he is as an alchemist. However, seeing how Sophia glazes Takumi like a girl smitten with love, Maria teases her, which makes Sophia blush hard, and she shyly leaves to avoid further embarrassment. 2 days later, Takumi finishes making the perception-blocking coats for the girls, and they geek out over them like brats over candy. For the next item on his to-do list, Takumi mentions that he plans to craft a horse carriage that will get them to the royal capital on time instead of borrowing one. However, since they don't have a monster horse to pull the carriage, Maria suggests they venture into the forest to capture one. With a creepy thrill about the wild, she assures Takumi that in the forest, they might even be lucky enough to capture a unicorn, or even a drake horse that is far stronger and faster than any other monster horse. Going ahead with Maria's plan, Takumi and the girls venture into the forest a few minutes later to capture a horse. This adventure makes Marble excited, and since she can't stand the slow pace Takumi and the girls are walking, she moves ahead of them and heads deeper into the forest. Suddenly, she spots an injured monster horse, but when she tries to help, the beast attacks her with a tremendous bolt of electricity. Still, Marble tries to reason with the horse, assuring it that she has an amazing master who can heal it. However, mid-sentence, she suddenly notices that they are surrounded by a swarm of monster insects, so she immediately creates a protective barrier made of webs to shield them from the insects. However, when the monster insects start to munch on the web like cookies, Marble panics and immediately tries to communicate with Takumi using her mana, but when it seems like it is not working, Marble screams before passing out, while her web barrier comes crashing down hard like I crashed on your mom's last night. However, in the next moment, when she opens her eyes, she sees Takumi and realizes the danger is over. After she cries in excitement, Takumi tries to heal the drake horse, but is shocked when the horse's defensive mechanism repels his healing magic. Suddenly, Sophia senses other monsters closing in on them, and as she alerts the others, Takumi does the most dumbest thing ever by sending both Marble and the injured drake horse inside his item box. Sophia immediately scolds him for failing to use his brain cells, explaining that only a brainless fool would place a monster of that size into a pocket dimension without forming a pact first. She tells him that doing so will put immense strain on his body, and as those words leave her mouth, Takumi's body confirms it by suffering from exhaustion, knocking him out cold. Several hours later in the house, Takumi is in bed trying to recover, but Sophia knows there will be no recovery unless Marble and the horse come out of the pocket dimension. So she holds Takumi's wrist and, using her mana, communicates with Marble, immediately telling her to get the heck out of the dimension together with the monster horse or their master will wake up in the afterlife. While Maria is out trying to purchase a healing potion for Takumi, Sophia stays by his side until Takumi finally regains consciousness, only to find Sophia sleeping beside him while holding onto his hand. so before his Excalibur charges, Takumi immediately wakes her up and thanks her for being such a sweet girl. Later on, Takumi, Maria, and Sophia head outside the mansion, where they find Marble and the Drake horse already out of the pocket dimension. After Takumi manages to heal the Drake horse, he names her Camellia, after a tree that retains its leaves all year round, and this makes Marble excited to finally have a beast like her as part of the team. Meanwhile, at a slave trading company in the capital, a certain beast girl named Raven is being trash-talked by the owner of the company because he sees her as useless and no one is willing to buy her. Even though the caretaker of the facility tries to console her, Raven goes to her room feeling like a worthless failure. Years back, she left her little brother in their poor village in hopes of coming to the capital to chase the bag and eventually pull her brother out of the slump. But now, that dream seems like a fairy tale, since no master is willing to buy a nerd who only loves to read about alchemy. Back at the mansion, the girls are worried sick about Takumi and how he has been working like a junkie, hustling to build toilets, refrigerators, and now the carriage at the same time. Sophia, in particular, fears he might one day die from overworking himself and begs him to consider his health. However, Takumi tells them not to worry about him and then leaves for the guild. Sometime later, when he gets to the guild, he notices there is a commotion going on, and when he asks the receptionist what's up, the guy explains that there have recently been reports of a monster terrifying the outskirts of town. After showing Takumi a sketch of the said monster drawn by an eyewitness, he asks Takumi the purpose of his visit to the guild that day, and Takumi tells him that he wants to register another pet. The receptionist claims he can't be surprised anymore after the monster spider Takumi tamed last time, but when Takumi pulls out the Drake horse from his pocket dimension, the guy nearly pees his pants. Turns out the Drake horse is the same monster everyone has been talking about, and its presence scares everyone in the guild. Later that afternoon, Sophia and Maria visit Gambo's blacksmithing shop to find Takumi dozing off like a drunk sloth, and even Gambo is forced to admit that Takumi really needs to rest and take things slow. A few days later, Takumi finally completes the carriage, and when the girls check out the interior, they are mind blown by how luxurious it is. Apparently, the outside of the carriage might look normal, but on the inside, Takumi has used spatial expansion to turn it into a 5-star, fully furnished 3-bedroom space. A few minutes later, the journey to the capital commences, but on the way, they stop to pick up Riel and his team, who are amazed at how pretty sick Takumi's carriage is. When Papek gets to see the carriage a little while later, the crazy businessman nearly loses his mind, begging Takumi to make more so he can sell on Temu, until Lord Godwin chops him on the head to force him to calm down. Lord Godwin is also impressed with how cool Takumi's carriage is, and is even willing to pay Takumi 1 billion Japanese yen to make one for himself. After riding for several hours, they finally make it to the royal capital, but before they meet the king, Papek asks to discuss something in private with Takumi. Once alone, he suggests that Takumi make his type of carriage for the king, believing that it is the fastest way for the king to see Takumi's exceptional talent. Since they should get an audience with the king in 5 days, Papek fears it might not be enough time to make the carriage, but Takumi assures him that it is enough time. However, Takumi mentions that all he will need is a large space to work, but Papek assures him that it won't be a problem. Later that night, Takumi informs Sophia and Maria about the slave trading company Papek had offered him to use its spacious garden as a workspace. However, the mention of a slave trading company sparks an idea in Sophia, and she suggests that Takumi consider buying a slave who is an alchemy nerd like himself to assist him with production. At first, Takumi protests, assuring her that he can handle the task alone, but when Sophia reminds him that they still need his pack to warm their cold kitties at night and don't want him to die yet, Takumi reconsiders. So the following morning, Takumi and Sophia meet the caretaker in charge of the slave trading company and tell him of his intention to buy a slave to expand his harem. However, he lets the dude know that he doesn't need just any pretty face, and all he wants is someone with both beauty and brains for alchemy. With that, the guy brings out Raven, the only girl he knows who is a freak for alchemy, and after the introduction, Takumi decides to test if Raven is truly skilled in alchemy like the dude claims, or just another fraudulent Instagram influencer. So he shows her an alchemy circle and then asks her to describe the process the circle is used for. After cracking her brain for a few minutes, Raven starts to cry because the only alchemy circle she knows is the one used to make candy machines. She finally admits to being a useless failure at alchemy, and then begs Takumi not to discard her like trash, but to her shock, Takumi tells her that he would like to buy her as his assistant. When Raven reminds him that she failed his test, Takumi tells her that she actually passed, because the circle truly is one for spiraling sweets. With that, the caretaker creates a master-servant contract between Takumi and Raven. When Takumi asks if Raven is okay receiving her wages daily, she refuses, insisting that Takumi send all her wages to her village. When Takumi asks why, she explains that her village is poor and that she was initially sold as a debt slave so her family could have money to eat, but now that she is working, she doesn't want her little brother to starve or become a slave like her. Takumi agrees, and when they get outside, he introduces Raven to Maria and Maple, who immediately start geeking out over how attractive Raven is. Meanwhile, in the neighboring kingdom, the bald-headed king is angry that his neighbor country is not showing them much respect and is ready to send his knights to teach them a lesson. However, his daughter and royal mage Elizabeth tells him to calm down and not act rashly. She explains that she has a plan to incite the church against their enemies, since everyone now knows that they have a mage disrespecting the church by using purification magic recklessly. Over the next couple of days, Takumi crafts the king's carriage, and while he works, Raven watches with keen interest, completely mesmerized and immediately turning into a fangirl. The following week, Takumi completes the king's carriage, and while he is admiring his work of art, the king himself approaches to compliment the beauty before his eyes. However, since Takumi has never seen the king in person, he has no idea who he is, and continues chatting with him casually until Popek and Lord Godwin come running in, shouting His Majesty. With that, the king officially introduces himself, and then thanks Takumi for solving the sewage problem in the kingdom. The following day, Takumi and the rest leave the capital, but while watching them leave, the king warns his court advisors to keep Takumi's visit to the palace a top secret. He fears that once everyone learns Takumi visited the palace, the Church of Divine Light is sure to act against them. A few days after they return from the capital, Maria and Sophia tell Takumi that instead of receiving wages, they would rather have him crack their pum-pum instead. When Takumi shockingly asks their reason for this unusual request, the girls explain that since he has been so good to them, they are happy just helping him relax. Raven, on the other hand, watches in amazement and chooses to remain silent, since her family is still in need of income and she prefers to continue receiving her wages. Meanwhile, in the neighboring kingdom, Elizabeth strategizes with a member of the Church of Light on how to deal with the famous mage, using purification magic and ridiculing the church. The next day at the mansion, Raven informs Takumi that she would like to register as an adventurer, just like Maria and Sophia. She excitedly explains that her intention is to raise her stats and increase her mana, and seeing how thrilled she is about becoming an adventurer, Takumi agrees. So later that day, he takes her to the guild, and while registering her as an adventurer, the receptionist brings up the idea of Takumi forming a name for his party. He tells Takumi that his party is the only top party in the guild without a name. However, when Takumi shyly admits that he has no idea what name to call his party, Barak, with his massive dome, suddenly shows up out of nowhere and is determined to beat an idea for a party name into Takumi. He drags Takumi to the field and starts tossing him around like a baseball, but every time he asks if Takumi now has an idea for a party name, Takumi's brain goes on a vacation, so the brute continues to beat the heck out of him until his brain decides to function. Hours later, when the girls learn about the traumatic beating Takumi suffered because he couldn't name the party, Maria immediately suggests they call the party the Johnny Sins Crew, but Takumi quickly shuts the idea down. Raven then suggests they consider the name the OnlyFans Graduates, but Takumi tells her to shut it since she is only smart when she is quiet. While Maria and Raven try to come up with a name for the party, Sophia burns with rage at the fact that her master was beaten to a pulp by the guild master and wants revenge. However, Takumi immediately begs her to calm down, claiming that the beating actually helped improve his combat skills. The next day, Takumi gives Raven her magic-enhancing ring and a weapon as a member of his party. When the Spider Girl shows up acting jealous for not getting a weapon like everyone else, Takumi also gives her one to calm her down. Later that day, after Takumi receives a second round of beating from Barak for failing to come up with a name for his party, the receptionist asks Takumi if he and his crew would be willing to take on an escort quest. Seeing how eager the girls are for an adventure, Takumi accepts the quest. The mission is to bodyguard a trader traveling to a neighboring town to purchase milk and other dairy products like cheese for his business. And Takumi is shocked upon learning that milk and cheese exist in this world, just as they do on Earth. On the way to the capital, they encounter a group of ugly goblins and a confrontation with a pack of beast wolves, but since they are in a hurry, they cannot stop to watch the situation unfold. So Camellia roasts the entire group of monsters with her powerful electricity, leaving everyone stunned by her immense power. Hours later, upon arriving at the neighboring town, Takumi and the girls decide to have a meal of creamy soup, and with how delicious it is, Takumi tells Sophia that they will need to get milk and cheese from the market before returning home. The team ends up eating to their fill until it gets dark, and while watching the girls enjoy their food, Takumi reflects on how it has been several months since he came to this world, and with how well he has bonded with each of them, it feels like he has known them all his life. The last thing he would want at this stage is return to his former virgin life where he was maidenless and had no chick to clap like you. However, the taste of milk and cheese makes him nostalgic, and when he suddenly remembers rice, he asks Sophia if he can also get rice in this world. She tells him yes, explaining that the grain can be found in the capital. Upon hearing this, Takumi almost loses his mind, and the girls are surprised that he is such a big fan of rice. Sophia, in particular, is shocked to see her master react so excitedly over food, and when she points this out, Takumi asks her if she ever feels nostalgic about leaving her hometown or thinks about returning. Sophia tells him no, saying she enjoys her present more than reminiscing about her past. She explains that for 50 years, she felt like she was caged like a bird because of the curse that locked her powers. But after forming a contract with Takumi and experiencing the freedom of her powers being unlocked, the last thing she wants is to return to her past. She thanks Takumi for giving her wings to fly, and for the very first time in her life, she is ecstatic about what awaits in the future. After everyone agrees with what Sophia says, Takumi realizes that just like Sophia, the goddess also gave him wings to fly, which gives him the perfect name for the party, the Angel's Wings. The girls love the name, and Takumi explains that the name symbolizes the fact that they have each been given wings to fly. 2 days later, after returning from the escort mission, the mansion is attacked with a poisonous mist by assassins sent by the church. The poison knocks out Sophia, Maria, and Raven, but since Takumi has poison resistance, he manages to defeat the assassins and then cure the girls of the poison. After rounding up the attackers, Takumi informs Barak about the assault on his home, and upon arriving at the mansion, Barak immediately advises Takumi to inform Lord Godwin, stressing that the situation should not be overlooked. Very early the following morning, Takumi reports the attack on his home to Lord Godwin, and that is when he learns that the culprits involved were members of the Divine Knight Squadron. This is a menacing group of fanatics who serve a goddess known as Anat and are responsible for executing anyone they judge as defying the teachings of the church. Lord Godwin suspects that they must have been sent by their enemies in the neighboring country, and this makes Takumi realize that the assailants who attacked his home the night before did not come to joke around. They truly came to take his head. Turns out, in the past the mages of the church were responsible for using purification magic to treat the disgusting sewers throughout the kingdom. However, the church did not do this for nothing, as they always charged a hefty sum. Ever since Takumi invented his self-purification toilets, the church mages have become irrelevant, and their source of income has been washed down the drain. When Takumi suggests that he hides in a different country, Lord Godwin tells him it is a terrible idea and assures him that staying in the kingdom is the only way they can protect him. Soon after, as they leave Lord Godwin's residence, the image of the girls almost being assassinated by the church fanatics won't leave Takumi's mind, and it makes him feel responsible for putting their lives in danger. Later that night, while having dinner, Takumi apologizes to the girls for putting them all in danger, but they shut him down, telling him to stop talking nonsense and explaining that they are all involved in the situation together. To improve their defenses and prevent future infiltration into the mansion, Takumi tells everyone that he has an idea to erect a magical device around the entire house that will keep out anyone who is not registered. The girls think it is a brilliant idea, but Sophia suggests that in addition to that, Takumi should also consider getting a tank for the team. However, the girls insist they don't need any man on the team, as they are content with just Takumi's trouser snake. Later that night, while the girls sleep, Takumi stays up sketching the alchemy magical circle for the magical barrier, and by the next morning he and Raven are all ready to start work. But Sophia interrupts, volunteering to help. With that, Takumi hands her the magic circle he drew and instructs her to carve it onto a metal sheet. Once the girls finish carving it, Takumi prepares the alchemy procedure, but then he notices Marble and Camellia playing with a stuffed doll golem, which catches his attention. When Raven notices him staring, she suggests a clever idea of crafting a golem as a line of defense instead of searching for a tank. But Takumi tells her that his current level of alchemy cannot handle such a complicated operation. Just then, the Spider Girl shows up and asks Takumi why he wants a golem so badly. After Takumi explains that it is for the security of the house, she tells him that he can simply tame a golem instead of creating one. Takumi realizes marble just made sense for the first time in her life, and after sharing the idea with Sophia, they all agree to head into the dungeon in search of an iron golem. Sometime later, when they arrive at the dungeon, they spot a giant stone golem, and the terrifying sight makes Sophia warn that they should just skedaddle. However, Takumi, desperate not to lose the golem, immediately rushes toward it despite her warning, and when he gets close, the girls rush after him, ready to defend their master. However, to everyone's shock, the golem shows no hostility toward Takumi, and while staring into the monster's eyes, Takumi sees the face of the goddess, which makes him realize that her blessing is truly protecting him. As he stretches his hand toward the golem's face, he tames the monster, shocking everyone at how fast and easy it happens. When Marble excitedly asks what he plans to name their new friend, Takumi thinks for a while before answering that he will call the monster Titan. With the mission completed, Takumi suggests they get going, but Sophia points out that with how big the golem is, entering the city with it will cause a massive commotion. This makes Takumi consider hiding the golem in his pocket dimension, but before everyone's eyes, the golem suddenly shrinks to Kelvin Hart's size to make the trip less disruptive. A while later, after arriving home, Takumi calls for an urgent meeting with the girls, where he informs them that he plans on dissolving their slave contracts so they can all go their separate ways. The girls are shocked to hear this, but Takumi explains that the last thing he wants is to put them in danger like before. Still, the girls protest, refusing to leave his side, and even after Takumi promises to compensate them with a large sum of money, they still decline. When Takumi continues to insist, Maria puts her blade to his face and threatens to cut off his mini pee-pee if he ever says that again. Realizing the girls are not joking, Takumi apologizes for being insensitive and agrees to let them remain by his side. The next day, Takumi creates armor made of steel for Titan, the golem, and this armor also has a built-in Alexa feature that helps translate how the golem feels into words everyone can understand. Not only that, Takumi goes even further by creating a massive enhanced Iron Man armor for the golem, making it the perfect defense for the team. Meanwhile, in heaven, the goddess Nolan is watching Takumi create his inventions when another goddess comes to inform her that they have recently observed traces of Anat's existence, the god of the church. At first, Anat was known to be an imaginary god worshipped by delusional followers, but the goddess reveals that recent events have proven Anat to be real, and not only real but on the verge of becoming an evil spirit. However, after hearing all this, Nolan refuses to take any action, explaining that she cannot interfere in the affairs of humans. This makes the other goddess suspect that Takumi's summoning was not an accident after all, but part of Nolan's plan, and that is why she blessed him with extraordinary powers. A year ago, a certain village was attacked by monsters, and the result was death and chaos, which led to most of the villagers leaving as refugees. Among them is a hot sugar mommy named Mani, who also lost her husband in the raid, while the nobles in the kingdom turned a blind eye to their suffering. Back in the present, after their last mission in the dungeon, Takumi decides it is time they try clearing a dungeon as a party. So later that day, they enter an A-rank dungeon, which is considered one of the most difficult to clear in the province. Right off the bat, they encounter monsters of various kinds, which they effortlessly slay as a group. Using her ability to hinder visibility, Marble is able to detect monsters before they can approach, making it easy for Takumi and the team to defeat them. After spending a whole day climbing through levels, Takumi and the team finally reach the last floor, leading to the final boss. Just when they think it will be smooth like the other levels, Takumi's bad luck kicks in, and the moron accidentally steps on a trap button, which immediately triggers a massive boulder rolling toward them. In a desperate attempt to escape, the team makes a sharp turn, entering an unknown path, and since the way back is blocked, they are forced to follow the passage, which leads them straight to the boss's cave. Before their eyes, a terrifying earth dragon appears, and without wasting time, it attacks, forcing Takumi and the team to respond with a counterattack. As Titan grabs the dragon's tail, Marble helps pin it down with her webs. Sophia stabs it, and with the dragon unable to move, Takumi, Raven, and Maria combine their magic abilities to blast the dragon with a massive inferno. However, just when they think the battle is over, the dragon retaliates by blasting them with scorching fire, which sends Titan crashing into the wall. At that moment, Sophia realizes that the dragon's weakness is its flank, and as she points this out, Takumi enhances his blade with powerful electricity and throws it straight into the dragon's mouth, instantly obliterating it. As the dragon vanishes, it leaves behind a chest filled with bling-blings and a hard material made from dragon scales, which catches Takumi's interest, and the girls tease him for being an alchemy geek. Shortly after they return from the dungeon, Takumi and the team are summoned to Lord Godwin's manor, where the Lord informs them about a village that was attacked by monsters about a year ago and was completely ignored by the nobles, which led the village to deteriorate into a wasteland. Lord Godwin wants Takumi to use his overpowered alchemy skills to rebuild the village so its residents can finally return to their homes. He mentions the village where Takumi helped rebuild the walls within a short period of time and believes Takumi is the best boy for the job. Even though Takumi does not see any challenge in the task, Sophia strongly opposes it, pointing out that taking on the mission will only expose him to more danger. When it looks like Sophia is about to start exchanging words with the Lord, Takumi tells her to calm down and then agrees to take on the task. He explains that he cannot ignore people who are homeless because, once upon a time, he was also homeless and a village took him in. Lord Godwin excitedly thanks him, and a while later, the instant Takumi and his crew arrive at the deserted village, they immediately get down to work. They construct roads, erect a massive wall to protect the village from future monster attacks, and also dig a deep moat to strengthen the defense. 10 days later, Takumi and his team finally transform the once wasted land into a frontier that can rival even the best of kingdoms, and once the work is completed, Takumi instructs Sophia to ride back to Lord Godwin's mansion to inform him that the refugees can now return home. After Sophia delivers the message, Lord Godwin is blown away to hear that Takumi managed to rebuild an entire village in 10 days. As the announcement spreads across the land, the refugees begin returning to their homes, but along the way, they remain skeptical, thinking it might be another prank from the nobles who have been deceiving them for years. However, upon arriving at the walls of the village, now transformed into a city, they are awestruck, and the second they walk in, Takumi approaches to welcome them to their new home. He introduces himself as the architect, builder, and engineer of this paradise, and also shows them a beautiful fort he has created for the governing bodies of the village and their knights. Later that day in the field, Sophia spots Mina, who, unlike everyone else, still looks unhappy despite the transformation of her village. After Mina explains that she has no desire to be happy after losing her husband, Sophia decides to play a pimp by inviting Mina to join her party, assuring her that her master is always in need of a fine baddie that can cream his sheep. Shortly afterwards, Takumi and Sophia meet Mina, and Takumi uses the opportunity to formally invite her to become a member of his party. However, Mina, thinking Takumi must be some noble, remembers how nobles treated her and her people like trash, so she politely declines to join the party. Takumi decides not to push the matter further, so Mina leaves, and since her shallow brain thinks Takumi is one of those nobles who will eventually get at her for refusing to let him hit, she decides to leave the village totally. However, as she heads into the forest, she encounters monsters, and Takumi and his team, already informed of monster activity in the surrounding area, immediately come to her rescue, saving her from being eaten alive by wolf monsters. This heroic effort from Takumi and his team touches Mina, helping her finally understand that inasmuch as Takumi is interested in her cookie pot, he is also interested in giving her a good life, so she thanks Takumi, and then agrees to become a member of Hiim. Meanwhile, news spreads even to neighboring countries about the latest development of a town that was once considered a wasteland, and when the king hears this, he is shocked that a fortress could be erected in such a short period of time. He immediately suspects that the infamous powerful alchemist of their enemy kingdom must be involved, and this makes his blood boil. However, his daughter, Elizabeth, calms him down, assuring him that the moment they have all been waiting for has finally arrived, the time to unleash the heroes. That night, Elizabeth briefs the three heroes, announcing that the time has come for the world to finally recognize them. Akira and Yamato are beyond thrilled and can't wait to show off their hero status to the world, but Akane, on the other hand, doesn't share the excitement and believes something suspicious is definitely going on. 3 months pass since Takumi transformed the dead village into an industrialized city, and now the villagers have all returned to work. The crops are steadily improving, and Takumi is pleased to see that they are now living fulfilling lives. However, deep in the surrounding forest, Sophia notices that the number of monsters has increased over time, now including creatures like bush lizards that were not there before. Much later, she brings the issue to Takumi, explaining that she believes monsters from nearby habitats have started advancing toward them, and this revelation worries Takumi. Very early the next morning, a messenger from Barak arrives, informing Takumi that he and his party are needed back at the Adventurers Guild. When Takumi asks the rugged-looking messenger if there have been any recent changes back home, the dude tells him about rumors circulating that the heroes from the neighboring country have suddenly appeared. Later that night, while Takumi has dinner with his girls, they discuss the sudden appearance of the heroes in the neighboring kingdom, and Maria doesn't see anything wrong, believing the heroes must have been sent by the goddess to correct the bad policies there. However, while reflecting on the issue later that night, Takumi knows the heroes weren't summoned by the goddess, but rather by their enemies to fight their war using forbidden magic. Still, he hopes the so-called heroes are good people who will correct the wrongs of the neighboring kingdom. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Sidonia, the king sends forth the heroes to show the world what they are capable of. However, even before they enter the carriage, Akira and Yamato are already being rude to their slave, Lulu, by talking down to her, but Akane stands up for her, warning them to stop being insensitive jerks. The next morning, Takumi and his party arrive back home, and on getting to the Adventurers Guild, the receptionist informs them that they have a quest from Papik to guard and escort him to the royal capital. A few minutes later, when they return home, Mina insists on tagging along on the quest, complaining that she can't stay home alone. Takumi tries to explain that she isn't fit for combat and that the mission might be dangerous, but the moment Mina flashes him her seductive eyes, the simp folds instantly and agrees to let her go with them. However, he says he will first need to register her as an adventurer. Meanwhile, the so-called heroes are already on their way to the Adventurers Guild, and for their first mission, Akira and Yamato openly act entitled, demanding they will need their sausage massaged by an elf girl. Akane, on the other hand, is deep in thought, desperately searching for a way to escape both them and the entire hero situation altogether. Because of her divine ability, known as the revelation skill, which works like a sixth sense, she has a strong feeling that there is someone out there who is truly meant to be the real hero. A few minutes later, at the guild, Mani finally gets registered as an adventurer, but suddenly, Akira and Yamato burst in, acting like they own the place. One beast adventurer tries to talk some sense into them, but he gets punched in the gut and dropped instantly, and they warn him never to talk back to a hero. The moment they set eyes on Sophia and Manny, they start making demands, telling Takumi to consider it an honor to hand over his girls to heroes, but Takumi refuses and tells them to go goon somewhere. This pisses off the monkey-brained heroes, who, for the last time, order Sophia and Manny to come with them, but the girls refuse outright, saying they would rather let gorillas bone them. Upon hearing this, Akira and Yamato lose it and immediately attack, but Takumi uses his alchemy skill to break Akira's sword, and when he drops Yamato like an insignificant roach, Akane is shocked beyond words. Even after being humiliated, Akira and Yamato refuse to let the matter slide, and as they leave, they promise to get their revenge on Takumi. With the troublemakers gone, Akane immediately approaches Takumi and apologizes for their behavior. Takumi tells her it is fine, and after they introduce themselves, Akane is shocked to realize that Takumi has a Japanese name. However, before she can say anything, Takumi leans in and quietly invites her to come spend the night at his hotel. Just from sensing his bad boy aura, Akane can tell Takumi isn't just an ordinary adventurer, so later that night, while everyone else is asleep, she and her servant sneak out, heading toward the hotel Takumi mentioned. Along the way, they encounter knights who chase after them, but Sophia and Marble step in to save them and then take them to meet Takumi at the hotel. There in the room, they have a serious conversation, with Akane wanting to know if Takumi is from Japan and was summoned. When Takumi admits that he really is from Japan, the girls are shocked, since they had always thought he was a native. So Takumi decides to open up and share everything about the summoning and the goddess. He also tells them how the neighboring kingdom used a dark magic spell to summon the so-called heroes, and how doing this has caused a major fluctuation in the flow of mana in the world. When Takumi asks why Akira and Yamato are not as level-headed as Akane, she explains that they were not always like that. Ever since they were summoned, their personalities have changed, and she suspects that the kingdom of Sidonia might have been poisoning their food, since she always uses purification magic before eating or drinking anything. Akane then begs Takumi to help her escape to a different country far away from all the madness, but Takumi tells her that she will always be on the run like John Wick, no matter where she goes. When Takumi notices the slave collar on Lulu's neck, Akane reveals that she can't stand it and hates the idea of enslaving someone. After Takumi helps her magically remove the collar from Lulu's neck, Lulu begs Akane not to abandon her now that she is no longer her slave. But Akane assures her that they will always be together as friends, not as master and servant. Following this, Takumi invites Akane to stay with them for the time being, and she agrees, so together they head back to the mansion. After dinner that night, Takumi, taking a cue from Akane, decides to free all his slaves, but Sophia protests, asking if his temporary madness has started again, so Takumi explains that he now sees all of them as allies and precious friends instead of slaves. He says they are more like family to him, and upon hearing these words, the girls are touched, so they agree to let him dissolve their slave contracts. Later that night, while playing around with his alchemy skills, Takumi receives an urgent message from the guild informing him that the recently developed village is under attack by a large horde of monsters. Shortly afterwards, Takumi and Sophia rush into the guild, where they meet Barak, along with Riel and his squad, already waiting for them. Barak explains that a large horde of monsters is advancing toward the village, but the timing is bad since most of the parties are already engaged in other quests. The receptionist interrupts, explaining that only 3 parties are available at the moment, which include Riel and his team, Takumi and his girls, and before he can reveal the last party, 5 freaking hotties suddenly show up, introducing themselves as the Spice Girls. After the red-haired leader of the Trophy Wives squad introduces each member of her team, Barak announces that they need to leave immediately. While Takumi, Marble, Maria, Raven, and Sophia follow the rest of the party heading toward the village, Akane and Lulu are left behind at the mansion, with Titan assigned to guard them. However, before they embark on the journey, Takumi gifts Sophia a special sword he crafted using the scales of the dragon they eliminated in the dungeon. Combining it with a second blade he also forged, Takumi believes they will be able to deliver devastating damage to their enemies. Upon arriving at the village, the team of parties is met with a terrifying sight. All kinds of monsters, including winged ones, have surrounded the village, and some are already climbing over the fences. Without waiting for any introduction, the party members immediately swing into action, cutting down every monster they encounter. Takumi unleashes Thor Thunder using the hammer he crafted, while Sophia takes down several monsters with a powerful whirlwind attack. As the intense battle between humans and monsters rages on, Takumi and the entire squad move straight into the village and begin clearing the monsters, terrorizing the villagers. With everyone working together, they manage to defeat a massive number of monsters both inside and outside the walls, and for the time being, the village is saved. However, many of the villagers suffer severe injuries, so Takumi instructs Sophia and Marble to heal as many of them as they possibly can. A few minutes later, Takumi joins the rest of the party members atop the wall, where everyone notices that the remaining monsters have begun to retreat into the woods. However, what catches everyone off guard is the orderly manner of the retreat, almost as if their movements are being coordinated. This leads Takumi to believe that someone, or some powerful monster, must be controlling the rest like puppets. When Riel disagrees with his opinion, Takumi explains that back when the Kingdom of Cydonia summoned their heroes months ago, there was a sudden fluctuation of mana on an enormous scale, which he suspects may have caused certain changes that led some monsters to evolve. Meanwhile, while the monster-human battle is ongoing, in the Kingdom of Cydonia, the king is informed of the situation, and the news pleases him. His informant explains that, if the battle continues, it will tip the balance of power in their favor, and the king finds the prospect deeply satisfying. His daughter, standing beside him, then suggests they take advantage of the enemy nation being occupied with war to attack all their allies using the summoned heroes, to weaken them and leave them powerless for the time when they eventually launch their full assault. Back at the battlefield, Raven meets Sophia and complains that Takumi has been giving out all the healing potions to the injured villagers without even considering himself. Upon hearing this, Sophia immediately confronts Takumi, telling him not to give everything away and to at least keep some for himself, but Takumi assures her that he will be fine as long as he avoids taking major hits. Seeing how much Takumi is willing to prioritize others over himself touches Sophia, and she quietly swears to protect him no matter what. A few hours later, Takumi is informed by Marble that the forest has begun to stir again, meaning another wave of monsters is about to attack. Determined to protect the village, Takumi and the rest of the party head outside the city walls to face them. As the monsters launch an all-out assault, everyone responds with combined magic attacks that devastate the battlefield, taking out most of the enemy forces. Working together as a team, they unleash precise attacks on the monsters, but suddenly, Sophia leaves formation and starts running ahead toward the enemies. Takumi tries to stop her, but she is as stubborn as my ex and refuses to listen. Suddenly, the monsters retreat, and just as the tension begins to settle, a giant two-headed monster appears before them and unleashes a deadly purple mist at Sophia. Takumi immediately suspects that this creature is their leader, but just then, Sophia takes a direct hit and crashes to the ground. As the monster moves in to finish her off, Takumi steps in and saves her just in time. Despite his warnings, Sophia continues to attack the beast alone, only to be struck again by the purple mist. When the monster prepares a massive inferno to finish her, Takumi intervenes once more, but this time they fight together. Using their combined attacks with their swords, Takumi shows remarkable resolve and completely obliterates the monster into smithereens. As the dust settles, Takumi heals Sophia's injuries, but then scolds her for acting so recklessly. She explains that her intention was to save him, but Takumi refuses to accept that excuse and continues to reprimand her for being more stubborn than a billy goat. Shortly afterward, Takumi is informed that all the monsters have been eliminated, and relieved by the news, he passes out on Sophia's honkers from exhaustion. Meanwhile, in one of the allied kingdoms, Akira and Yamato are having a field day, causing as much harm to the residents as possible while fooling themselves into thinking they are doing the hero's work. A few days later, Takumi and the team return to the mansion, and during dinner, Takumi has a private talk with Sophia, where he apologizes for yelling at her, and Sophia, in turn, apologizes for nearly throwing her life away. Takumi tells her that all he wants is for them to fight as partners on the field during the day, and on the sheet at night, and that message deeply moves Sophia, so she promises to ride with him till eternity. Several days later, Takumi takes Akane and Lulu to meet Lord Godwin, requesting permission for them to stay. Lord Godwin readily grants his approval, but afterward, he informs Takumi about the attacks carried out by the heroes against their kingdom's allies. Hearing this, Akane realizes that sooner or later she is bound to face Akira and Yamato. Comment, Alchemist Goat, if you watch this recap to the end. If you enjoy anime recaps like this, subscribe to the channel and watch this next video.